Hey guys, so today you are going to meet David Allen Arnold. He is an aerial photographer. I believe I'm saying that correctly. So he takes pictures from way up above. He has a very interesting story, and I think you guys will really like it. He wrote a book. His book is called Help from Up Above, and it's really about his life and how he got to where he is. He also wrote another book, which you will hear a little bit about during the interview. What I find interesting about this interview and about David is that he made a career really out of nothing but hard work. He didn't have some fancy degree from some Ivy League school. He didn't have a lot of money and connections. He really worked hard, and his hard work was recognized. And that's pretty much how he got to where he is today. So, the interesting thing for me is that everybody takes a different path, and you never know what's going to get you to where you want to be. But one thing's for sure is hard work definitely pays off. So I hope you guys like this interview. Again, subscribe to the Oh Hell No podcast. I'm on most platforms: Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes. I have a YouTube channel. I have my own website where you can download the podcast from there. I'm on Podbean. I'm everywhere, people. So just download the episode. Hit me up. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm on Instagram at the Oh Hell No podcast. And I'm also I have a website, and you can send me an email at the Oh Hell No podcast at gmail.com. So I would love to hear from you guys. I would love to hear some of your thoughts about some of the shows, some of the past shows. So please let me know what you're thinking. I really want to know. That's why I'm asking. And if you haven't checked out my new page, it's called Hot Gal Lashes. So check that out too. I'm selling lashes and makeup, and check it out. If you're not into that stuff, pass the information along to someone who is. So enjoy this episode, and until next time.
Welcome to Oh Hell No with Nicole.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Oh Hell No podcast. Today, I have David Allen Arnold. He is an airborne cameraman and also an author. Welcome, David. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Nicole, thank you so much for having me on. I absolutely love your show.
Thank you. I appreciate that. What's your favorite episode so far?
In fact, the favorite, I wouldn't say a favorite episode, but the one that really struck me was the man that you had on who had survived cancer. And I listened to his story and everything that he did and he learned about, when he was fighting cancer. And it was just so meaningful. And just kind of helped me to really just think about like the food I eat, my lifestyle, the things that he rattled off. If you exercise, you're 70% less likely to get cancer. It was just so useful. And I've since I heard that show, I have sent several people who I know are either battling cancer or someone in their family is. And I said, you've got to hear this show about this guy who did all of this and his experience of it. It's just so educational. So I've sent your link to your podcast to many people, and they're very excited to hear about it. Oh yeah, send me the link for that podcast. I want to hear that. And so that was the one that I think, not necessarily my favorite interview, but I think it just struck me the most. And it's the one that I've sent to the most people and tell them to check it out.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I do remember that podcast, and it's very informative. I love all of my guests. They're so smart and so, amazing. So now you're a part of that too. So tell
Thank
me,
you. Can I ask you a question?
sure.
How did you come up with the Oh Hell No podcast?
So, the name "Oh Hell No" is something that I used many, many years ago when I used to follow gossip, right? So I love entertainment gossip, and I started this little blog called "Oh Hell No" because I feel like every time I read something in the gossip magazines, I'd be like, "Oh hell no, I can't believe this! Like this is crazy." So now, years later, I decided to do a podcast just talking about my life and why I don't feel like I've found my passion in life and I'm not fulfilled. And I decided that I'm going to call it Oh Hell No because I just felt like every day was like an Oh Hell No, you know? And as the podcast morphed into these interviews with people, I started asking them about their oh hell no moments because I feel like in life we all have these moments and some of them stick out more than others. Some of them we learn something, profound. So I just like people to share that with us so that we all can kind of see that, you know what? Everyone has ups and downs, but it doesn't stop us from getting to where we're supposed to be.
Amen. Well, I just love it. I think it's such a passionate topic.
Thanks. I appreciate that. So I want to ask you, what is an airborne cameraman?
Well, I fly in helicopters and airplanes for just about every TV network in the world. And believe it or not, I have even flown for the TMZ network.
Wow.
And well, you mentioned gossip and celebrities, so I flew for TMZ, and that show kind of opened my eyes because I knew what TMZ was, and I thought I kind of understood how they got their stories and how they followed celebrities. But what was kind of surprising to me was how much the celebrities like it. I thought the celebrities were battling always to stay away from the paparazzi, but in working for their network, I kind of sort of realized that, well, actually the celebrities like being followed and they love the idea that millions of people are watching them through the iPhone cameras, that the TMZ guys use to catch them walking out of a Starbucks or something like that.
Yeah, I can imagine because, I mean, now that we have all of this social media, you see that these people are, on it. They're showing you what they're doing. They're talking to us all the time. So I could definitely imagine that they love that stuff.
I thought that the celebrities would be at war with the paparazzi, but I think actually they like to be able to get their ideas out and the thoughts that they're thinking and the clothes that they're wearing, and so these paparazzi are actually a way for them to link to their public and just sort of express themselves a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So what did you think you were going to be when you grew up? Like as a young boy, what did you think that you would do when you grew up?
Well, I thought I would be doing what I'm doing right now in this very moment.
Really?
I really, at an early age, when I was in high school, this story is in Help from Above. I talk about being a kid in school in a little rural town in Florida, and I was kind of curious about the world, and I thought, wonder what I want to do, and in the library of my town, I stumbled across a book called Skywalking. And this book was written, it's a biography about George Lucas, who's a famous filmmaker who made Indiana Jones and the Star Wars movies. And he was like me. He started in a small rural town in the middle of nowhere, and he went on to revolutionize the world of movies. And I looked at that story and I thought, oh, well, if he could do that, coming from nowhere, in some agriculture place, then I could do that, in my little rural town in Florida. And so from then on, I knew that I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to work in entertainment. I didn't know I wanted to end up in Hollywood, but I kind of knew that's where most of it happens. And now here I am, about almost 30 years later, I'm in Hollywood. And now that I'm writing books, I'm telling my stories. And, in almost the same way George Lucas did. I'm not making huge movies, but I'm reaching out to people and sharing with them stories that I think are important. And I'm actually excited for kids today to read Help from Above, because in that book is my story of how I started sweeping the floor and then wound up working for TMZ and ABC, CBS, NBC, HBO, Showtime, Fox, basically every TV network that there is.
Wow, that's really amazing. One, that you knew from a young age what you wanted to do, because that's not very common. And two, that you are actually doing it, you know? So tell me, how did you find your way to this career? I know it's all in your book, and we're going to talk a little bit about your book a little bit later, but I always like to, just talk about the person first and where they're coming from and, what they've been through. So just give us like a high level overview of how you got to be where you are today in terms of your work. Were you always on this path? Was there anything that threw you off and you got back on? Like, can you briefly tell us?
Well, number one, I didn't have a plan,
Mm-hmm.
which I never do. The one thing I think you'll learn from my story is I never have a plan from how to get from point A to point B. I knew that I wanted to work in the entertainment business. I had not a clue how I was going to get there. But I really focused less on where I was, as a young kid entering the world of work in Florida. I never worried about where I was. I really was focused on where I was going. And that drove me. When I started to look for work, I would basically look in the phone book for any company that had any kind of a listing that pertained to filmmaking or television or photography. And I would go visit those businesses every single week. And I'd ask for work. I'd say, hey, here's my name, David Allen Arnold. This is my phone number. I can do anything you guys want, whatever you want. I'll work for free. You got anything you want me to do? I'll just start working right now. And I would go and visit them every day, or not every week, but every day. Every week I would go keep in touch and follow up with them and leave samples of my work. And there was a company that the guy at the front desk finally got fed up with me coming around. He said, look, quit coming around here. We have no use for you. All we do is aerial photography. And I said, oh, okay, that's fine. So I scratched them off my list. I never called them again. And about 3 weeks later, they called me. And unbeknownst to them, someone on their staff was planning to quit. And when that guy quit, they remembered me, and they remembered how persistent I was, always coming around and keeping in touch. And so when they suddenly, out of the blue, had an opening, they thought of me, even though I had no experience, no knowledge of aerial photography, but it was really probably an attitude that they liked. And so I think it's important for kids today to hear that story and maybe think about their career and their dreams and where they want to end up, and that maybe there's a way it can happen, even if on paper it looks impossible.
Right. Absolutely. So, flying, did you learn how to fly at a young age or did you do this later on in life?
No, I had no background in aviation. I didn't know anything about flying. The only thing I knew about aviation is that sometimes airplanes and helicopters crash. That's all I knew, and I wasn't interested in it. So when they offered me this job, flying for TV shows and movies with the camera system, I had to think about it. And I thought, well, this isn't something I wanted to get into, but they're offering me the thing that I've dreamed of, which is working in film and television. And so I stepped out of my little comfort level and stepped into the role of being a helicopter cameraman, and I embraced it, and I've been doing it ever since.
Wow, that is so awesome. My God, David. Like, you got me speechless right now. That is really cool.
Well, I think if there's one lesson there, it's be careful what you wish for, because you might get it.
Yeah.
And it may not be what you thought you wanted, but if you're open to it, and like I did, if you're willing to step out of your comfort level to do something that somebody else wants you to do, you may find that that actually is a path to your dreams. And so, sometimes just having an unreasonable wish is the most important thing. And what comes next, if you're open to it, may surprise you.
Yeah, definitely. So, what excites you about what you do? What is the most exciting part of it? What do you love? Is it the flying? Is it the
Well,
pictures, the people, the places? Like, what stands out for you?
well, I love all of it. Every day I go to work. So to give you an example, 2 days ago, we took off from an airport in Los Angeles and we flew next to the KTLA news helicopter. And we filmed them flying around Los Angeles to do a commercial for their newscast. And as we're doing that, we're sort of zigzagging back and forth and around this other helicopter. Underneath them is a city pulsing with life and 15 million people all, working and driving and walking through the streets. And all of that is within my camera frame. And in the center of that frame is this helicopter, which is just sensory overload of helicopter blades spinning at near supersonic speed. It's just an absolute feast for the senses. And to see the world in that way and through that lens floating above a big American city is just breathtaking to behold. And that's just a typical day at my office. That's the kind of stuff that we do every day in my job, which like I said, when they offered me that job 23 years ago, I didn't know where I was going to end up, and I didn't even know if I would survive it. I thought, well, what if the helicopter crashes? But because I took a chance and I got into it, now this is what I do every day for work. And it's always exciting. It's always spectacular. And sometimes it's a little dangerous, but there's, I think, an important aspect to adventure that's really good for the soul.
Right. So, what is the most challenging part of your day if you had to pick something that, challenges you?
Well, I would say one of the big challenges of my career is just to do it. I've met many people over the years who won't set foot in a small helicopter. They know it's dangerous. They know that the helicopter could crash, and they just won't go near it. And so throughout my career, some of my colleagues have crashed and been killed. And so just to go to work is a decision, with what I do. And so that's a bit of a challenge. It's something that, I have to be aware of and sort of prepare for and accept, to go and do, I think, a very beautiful and very powerful thing with my camera, but also accept that there's a risk and a danger that comes with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you choose your assignments or you get assigned what you're going to do?
Well, I'm freelance. So for the past 20 years, I've been working independently, which means that I don't have a job. So the only time I'm working is when someone calls and says, hey, we want you to fly over Los Angeles and film the news helicopter. Or we want you to go to Dutch Harbor, Alaska and fly over the boats for Deadliest Catch. And at that point, it's up to me to it's kind of like Mission Impossible. You get that call and it's a message and we want you to go here and this is very dangerous and you may not come home. But, that's the kind of calls that I get. And then I decide, okay, I want to do this, or you know what, that's too dangerous. I don't want to go there, or it's up to me.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So what led you to write this book that you wrote? Your book is called A Help from Above. So what led you to, decide that, hey, I want to write this book and tell my story? Was there any one particular thing, a person you met, or how did that come together?
Yes. What happened to me is in 2013, the little town that I live in was taken over by an organized crime ring. And I took issue with them because they had their headquarters at a school bus stop in my little town. And I stood up to them and I fought back and I never stopped fighting. And I basically drew a line in the sand. I said, hey, you can have corruption, you can have violence, you can have crime anywhere in the world, but you don't do that here at a school bus stop. And in the process of that, I had to begin documenting the story because that was the only way. I mean, how do you get rid of an organized crime ring? You know, the only thing you can really do to them is the thing they fear most, which is exposure.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that organized crime doesn't keep records is because a paper trail can put them in prison. So what I had to do was to start documenting them, what they were doing. And over time, I realized that the only way to use that properly was to make a book about it. So I wrote the book, and that book is coming out this summer on Amazon. And as I wrote the books, someone looked at it who knows about books, and they said, "Oh, this is okay, Dave, but you got to write another book first. You got to write a book about who you are and what you do." And that was a strange experience for me because I've never talked about who I am or what I do. My neighbors don't know that I fly for the World Series and Super Bowl and Deadliest Catch. I've never spoken about what I do for a living. And I said, okay, but I can do that. So I sat down and I wrote another book, and that's called Help from Above. And in the process, I began telling stories that I've never told anyone. And I got a little bit embarrassed because I knew right away that most of my stories of life and death and adventure in the sky, usually the really exciting stories happened only because I made a mistake or I used bad judgment. And I said, well, if I'm going to tell the truth about my life and my work, I'm going to have to tell everyone what I did wrong. So I started to write that into my stories. And I think that that's probably the thing that people will find the most in that book is that, these are stories of a imperfect, flawed human being. And I think that it's also important as I got comfortable with telling those stories, I kind of recognize, you know what, if I'm going to be honest, this is what people need to know is, not that I flew for the World Series, but what did I do wrong, and then still flew for the World Series. Because if they know what I did wrong and where I was able to get to in my life and career, then they'll also know, hey, you know what, if they have a dream, they can have their dream too. And it doesn't matter if they're ready. It doesn't matter if they do everything right. It doesn't even matter if they make mistakes. As long as they keep going, they can end up where they want to be.
Definitely. Absolutely. So, what was your favorite part of the book writing process? Was it No, go
That
ahead.
was it. That was my favorite part was acknowledging my flaws.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I even say in some of the stories where everything goes crazy. And I'm sitting in the middle of this chaos and it's life and death and I may not come home and I don't know how I'm going to solve this. And I look around, I go, well, all of this is happening because of me.
Yeah.
The only reason that my life's in danger or that I may not be able to make it back to the United States if I'm overseas, whatever is going wrong that day, the only reason that happened was because of my bad judgment. And so my favorite part of Help from Above is telling the truth about the things I did wrong so that people can see whether it was help from above, whether it was someone who, took pity on me and helped me out, whatever it was. It wasn't my smarts and it wasn't my wisdom. It was, something else that got me back from the brink of disaster.
So you post a lot of amazing pictures on Instagram. And from what I'm understanding, you're taking these images, right? Or is there someone else taking them?
Well, it depends. If you go to Instagram, what you'll see is probably 98% pictures that were taken by me. Sometimes I'm flying in the aircraft that you'll see. So in that case, someone else on the ground usually has to take my camera and snap some pictures while we're flying. But the rest of it is either stuff that I've captured with GoPros. I do a lot of photography inside the cockpit. So when we're flying for Survivor and we're floating over the Survivor beach in our helicopter, I have cameras inside the cockpit that show all of that. And I've really enjoyed over the past 2 years capturing a lot of that photography And one of my friends is a big TV producer. And one day he said, Dave, no one's ever seen stuff like this. And so I recognize that's kind of cool. It's really fun for me to kind of bring people along on my adventures and put them in that environment where we're flying just inches above the waves on Deadliest Catch, as the guys are fishing for Alaskan king crab, or if we're circling over a stadium for the Super Bowl. I just really enjoy putting cameras in there and showing people what that looks and sounds like.
Do you ever use drones?
I have. There's a lot of stories in my next book about how I use drones to search for someone who went missing. And I really tell the daily struggle to get them to work, to, if I'm in a wilderness environment, to be able to get them to take off and start flying without hitting anything, to get them to go. I live in the mountains, so the air is very thin here. And so to get a drone to fly into thin air to try and find someone who's gone missing is a challenge. And so I'm very open about all the drones that I've crashed into trees and that ran out of battery power and fell into the forest, and all of those daily challenges, and also the fact that the thing that I loved about that drone adventure was that the people who lost their son, and we couldn't find him, nobody knew where he went, but I just know it was a great comfort for that family to be able to take the pictures from my drone and look at them with their own eyes, from their home several hundred miles away, and have just some peace of mind to say, you know what, we don't know where he is, but by golly, we were able to look through that forest with our own eyes to see if we could see any sign of him. And I know that was a comfort to them during those days.
Yeah. So is there any special skill that you have to have, or any special training that you had to have, for doing what you do every day? Like, do you have to have like some special swimming skills, or I don't know, survival skills, or just in case something happens? Like, was there any training that you had
Yes.
to do?
Yeah, there was. Just to give you an example, about 2 years ago, a journalist called and he said, "Hey, Dave, I want to go with you on Deadliest Catch and fly in a helicopter and take pictures of you, filming for the show over the crab boats." And I said, "Yeah, no problem. We're gonna send you to a Coast Guard academy where they're gonna put you in a helicopter and flip you upside down and sink the helicopter in the water, and then you have to practice getting out of the helicopter." And because that's the training that we do on Deadliest Catch. It's so dangerous up there that we have to be prepared with some skills and equipment if something goes wrong, how to physically get out of a sinking aircraft in near freezing ocean water. And so this journalist is hearing all this and he goes, "I got to do what?" And and I told him how dangerous it is to fly in some of the places that we work. And he said, "You know what? I don't think I want to go."
I don't blame him.
So that never happened. Maybe he'll use my GoPro footage someday to do an article on it. But he talked himself right out of it when he found out, the skills that he would have to fly up there.
Yeah, that is no joke. Wow. So tell me 3 things that you're passionate about.
3 things that I'm passionate about. Without a question, I'm very passionate about raising my son, spending time with him. My little one is now 8 years old. In those 8 years, I've never missed a day with him. And he doesn't ever sit and watch TV shows and movies without me. If he's watching a movie, we're watching a movie. We were talking one day and he suddenly realized that I knew the names of his Pokemon characters. And he just looked at me with this look of shock of, "Dad, you know this Pokemon and that Pokemon?" I said, "Yeah, buddy, I do." And I knew that because he and I would sit and watch his Pokemon TV shows together. And, I don't particularly like some of the cartoons he watches, but I make sure that he and I spend a lot of time together, and I never, assign him to to something like a TV show to keep him quiet or out of my hair. If he's with me, we're going to do stuff together, and that means even if it's some crazy kids Cartoon Network show, we'll watch it together and we'll experience it together, and then we'll go outside and play. But I would make sure I spend time with him. So I'm very passionate about raising my little one and teaching him how to be a good human.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I'm very passionate about making the world a better place. I've spent years of my life battling the forces of evil to make this school bus stop safe again. And as I got further and further into it, it was an unbelievable nightmare to take on a criminal gang, to take on corrupt police officers, corrupt politicians. Basically what organized crime is, which is bad guys committing crimes and killing people, and the proper authorities allowing it and looking the other way and in fact covering up those crimes. I mean, that was a nightmare to deal with. But throughout all of that time, I just had this sort of unreasonable hope that over time I would win and they would lose, and that 10 years from now I'll still be here and they won't. And so that's something I'm very passionate about, is making the world a better place, making it better for our kids than it was for us.
Wow. That is spectacular. I love that. No, I really do. I mean, it sounds like a movie. You see those things on TV and you hope that it's not real, but unfortunately it is, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have, I fought with this crime ring for 5 years. And in the beginning, all my neighbors were with me. Everybody was on board because it's at a school bus stop. So a lot of people answered the call when I rang the alarm bells. However, they were also targeted with corrupt politicians who threatened to shut down their family business, with killers who threatened to kill them. And so over time, a lot of people had to back away and stop talking about it publicly. Mm-hmm. And so that was a very scary and dark time. And that's how you want to know how organized crime keeps going, because everyone knows it's illegal. The way it keeps going is fear. And that was a very fearful time, a very dark time. And one of my neighbors told me one day, we were talking, and he said, Dave, I can't be seen talking to you. And I said, oh, why is that? He said, oh, I'm afraid they'll kill us.
Wow.
So it got so dangerous that even being seen talking with me, because everyone knew I was fighting with them, just being seen talking with me was considered a dangerous thing to do. And it's true. That's how bad things got. He was right. He was one of the smart ones that figured out that he was in danger, even to be seen associating with me, because I was on television, I was on the radio, and I said, this makes us completely unsafe and I'm not going to tolerate it. And therefore I became a target for retribution and anyone who was helping me. I mean, and just to give you a sense of how dark things got, I tried to organize a candlelight prayer vigil for one of the victims of the school bus crime ring. And the church across the street from the school bus stop wouldn't allow us to use their parking lot for their prayer vigil. And I had the victim's family coming to town, and we were going to all gather around them and sing some songs and have some prayers and just basically welcome anyone that wanted to support them or, help them to find their missing son. And the church said no. And that's, in fact, it was so bad that I couldn't get anyone. No one in town would let us have the prayer vigil. And so we wound up having to do it on the side of the road.
Wow.
And and so I think when people learn, that book is coming this summer. And when people learn the truth of that and the struggle I went through and how dangerous it was and how hard it was to make some of those choices, to decide whether to move forward and do the right thing or to do like everyone else and cower in the face of evil. And it may not be a movie, but it will be a documentary because we filmed everything that happened during those days.
Wow. That's amazing. I can't wait for that book to come out so I can read it. Oh my gosh. So this question might not even make sense for you because, I was going to ask you, is there anything that you want to do but are afraid to try? But it seems like you're pretty fearless, Dave.
Well, no, I'm not fearless. I have every same fear that you have, so anything that you wouldn't want to do, I might not want to do either. I had to decide if I wanted to fly in helicopters,
Hmm.
and I did it, but it was a scary choice. And I've had to deal with the consequences, the loss of some of my colleagues. In Help from Above, I tell the story of one of my best friends on planet Earth and how he entered the sky for the last time in 2013, and I lost my friend, and that's tough. That's no fun.
Yeah.
And it's a risk that I have to deal with, and I'm just like anyone. I'm if gravity's coming to get me, I'm scared too. If a gang of gangsters is coming to get me because they want to keep making money illegally at a school bus stop, I'm just as susceptible. I feel the same fears that everyone else does,
Yeah.
and so a lot of things scare me, and so for me to write a book about my life and to start telling stories that I've never told anyone was so completely uncomfortable for me and absolutely scary to appear on a radio show or a podcast like you're doing and talk about my life. I was absolutely not comfortable doing that and nervous about it. And I didn't want to I never did any public speaking at all, ever. And so for me to even be on this show with you is a great leap that I had to make out of my comfort zone and to just jump in and start doing it. And to my lifestyle is to just take it on with the force of a hurricane. So, I was scared of public speaking as much as anything, but I took it head on and fully. And so now here we are, and I'm talking to you and your listeners.
Yeah. Good for you getting over your fear. So, what has been the best assignment you have had to date?
I don't really have a favorite. I definitely love the work, the volunteer work that I did to secure my town from the bad guys. And I guess that's the most unique because after working for Monday Night Football, the Super Bowl, the World Series, Amazing Race, Survivor, Deadliest Catch,
Come
we just did
on.
National
None of
Geographic
that
Live in
jumps
Yellowstone
out.
Park.
None of that jumps out like, oh man, I remember when we did this and this was like so awesome. Like nothing you don't feel like was like your best or your most favorite.
No, I think they're all sensory overload, honestly. I think
Okay.
flying, we just flew over National Geographic
Mm-hmm.
for Yellowstone Live. So we were live to the world. The pictures that came through my camera as we're hovering over the park went live to 15 million people and on their TV sets. And, there's this sort of pressure
Mm-hmm.
of not messing up. If you think about stage fright, imagine if 15 million people were watching you at your desk, you know, uh, and
Yeah.
I don't want to screw up while I'm on live television with my camera system.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of all consuming. And then the host of the show sat next to me. So if you watch that show, you'll see me on National Geographic sitting next to the host of the show as she introduced the audience to Yellowstone Park from above as we flew around all the spectacular sights and features of the park. And when we look down, we're filming, for example, a grizzly bear who's walking under our helicopter, and he weighs about the same as your car.
Mm.
And these grizzly bears will eat you alive. They don't. The way grizzly bears work is they don't stalk and kill a person and eat them. When they catch a person, they just start eating them. They don't even bother to kill them first. And so we're watching this grizzly bear, rummage through the wilderness under our helicopter. And you have to look at that and go, well, what happens if we have to land here with this bear? Like, what if our engine quits running and we fall out of the sky and land next to this bear? And so we're hovering over this grizzly bear who's looking for something to eat. And I'm in this helicopter with all this crazy amount of violence and noise. The aircraft's moving around. It's deafening. The sound of the machine itself, you have to put on ear cups just to cover your ears so you can hear yourself think, and all of this noise. and it's a bit overwhelming. And every show that we do is like that. If we're hovering over, boats in the deadliest catch with 30-foot storm waves crashing against the bow, all of this is happening around me and underneath me, and there is a danger. If we fall into the ocean next to the crab boat, we're going to have a hard time surviving in that water. If
Yeah.
we have to crash next to a grizzly bear, and that's how the book begins. Is when I'm flying over grizzly bears in Alaska, and so I don't have a favorite. I just think every single show is a spectacular adventure,
Mm-hmm.
and I love all of them. And I'm glad that people start to hear and experience some of those stories of what goes into my work, and flying over these places, and filming people in the Bering Sea, or animals in the wilderness of Yellowstone Park, or the crazy racing people who are running through the streets trying to win $1 million on an amazing race, or going back to your experience of gossip television, flying over the celebrities in Hollywood, and zooming in on them from 1,000 feet as they're walking to Starbucks, or driving their luxury cars through Beverly Hills. And that's
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a favorite. I just think they're all interesting jobs.
So everyone in the helicopter, the whatever you guys are in, you all know how to land in case of an emergency or do whatever needs to be done, right?
Well, if you fly in a helicopter,
Mm-hmm.
here's what's going to happen. The pilot will let's say me and you are going to go on a helicopter flight.
Mm-hmm.
So the helicopter pilot will gather us at the aircraft,
Mm-hmm.
and he'll start a presentation. He's going to show you how to open and close the doors.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to show you how your seatbelt operates. He'll show you where the fire extinguisher is if we need it, and he'll tell you if we have to land, like if we're hovering over the grizzly bears and the engine quits running, he'll tell you do's and don'ts from the time that we fall out of the sky and land next to the bear to how to get out of the aircraft at that point. And it's just like if you get on an airliner, they're the same thing. They're going to show you where the exits are, how to
Okay.
get out of the aircraft if you have to. They're going
Right.
to show you how the oxygen masks work if there's a problem with the pressurization.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to show you how the seatbelts work, and they're going to prepare you to say, okay, well, we're just going to fly, across the country to another airport. But if something bad happens, these are the people you have to listen to, because we're going to give you instructions for what to do to how to safely get out of the aircraft, and help each other to get out of the wreckage, and that's it. So same as with the helicopter. They're gonna explain to the pilot's going to explain to you how to keep yourself safe even if something's gone wrong and we've had to make an unscheduled landing somewhere.
The basics, yeah. So, how many people do you usually fly with? Like, what's the most that you've flown with?
It's typical for about maybe half to two-thirds of the flying that I do. It's just me and the pilot.
Oh, okay.
Um,
So that's small. Let's just
and yeah, pretty much.
yeah.
So when we flew for National Geographic for Yellowstone Live, we had the host for the first episode. She flew with us.
Mm-hmm.
And then the following 3 nights on Yellowstone Live, it was just me, the pilot, and a producer. And the producer would be talking to the other directors that were in the live truck
Mm-hmm.
and back at the studio, and they would tell her, hey, we want another shot of bison. So she tells the pilot, I want a bison shot. And so the pilot would then fly over to the other side of the park. He'll find the bison. I'll zoom in on them with the camera. And that's pretty much how we work.
Okay.
TMZ the same way. We had a producer on board, and that producer knew which celebrities we wanted to fly over, and where we would go in Hollywood to film different areas that they wanted to show on the network.
Nice. So, what do you do to, I don't know, de-stress? Because this seems like a
Oh, to
very
de-stress.
intense, yeah, like it's an intense career. So, what do you do to just center yourself and just relax and prepare yourself for the next adventure?
Well, it's what I'm doing right now. I'm sitting in my house, which is on top of a mountain above Los Angeles, And even though I live in the biggest city, one of the biggest cities in America, um, where I live is all surrounded by trees. It's
Mm-hmm.
forested. Um, and I found this little pinprick of geography in Los Angeles that although I'm in the asphalt jungle where I live, it's just a beautiful cloud forest. So I come home, it's all peace and quiet here. I take my little one, we either watch a TV show he likes, or we'll go play soccer, or we'll play catch in the yard, and we'll take care of our dog, and just live a very peaceful, quiet life. And that's all I want to do. Everyone says, "Where are you going to go for vacation, Dave?" I always say, without hesitation, I want to go home.
That's nice. So, do you think you'll retire anytime soon?
No, I'm not particularly planning to retire. I'm keeping quite busy with work, and the only thing that I would say is, now I don't just fly over, Yellowstone Park for National Geographic or The Fisherman for Deadliest Catch. Now I go do those things, and then I go back to my little house in the woods, and I document the stories and write them down for people to read in the books. I put Instagram posts that you've seen of, pictures and videos of my adventures. And so I spend about half of my time, sharing those adventures with people. And I don't think I'm retiring. I think I'm probably getting busier because now that I've added that to my workload, I've got, more stuff to do on my off time.
Yeah,
And
it
and so
feels
here we are.
it,
Here we are.
it feels like it's like opening another chapter for you, like the documenting and the writing, and like it's another chapter being opened, which is great because it's another medium and just another way of putting your adventures out into the world. So I think it's great.
Well, it might surprise you how uncomfortable I was to tell these stories. Um, I had to do it because of the struggle I was having with the organized crime, and I got pushed into this situation where I had to tell the story just to get, public support for law enforcement to shut this thing down. But I really, I just really wasn't comfortable, even talking. I just had never told anyone. If you lived next door to me, up until about last year, Nicole, you wouldn't even know that I flew for National Geographic or Discovery Channel. You wouldn't know any of that because if I saw you, we would just talk about, you or your pets or your family or whatever was happening around us. I would never say a word to you about where I had gone for a work trip or whatnot. So this was a very uncomfortable thing for me to begin to start to tell those stories, talk about where I go for work and what I'm doing when I'm there. And the best thing about it for me, as I started to do that, is I thought, you know what, I'm really glad that this is happening because I really want kids today to hear all these stories and to know that I'm not perfect and to know that whatever flaws they have, they could still work on the Super Bowl or fish for the deadliest catch or win the amazing race. And I have a very strong belief in the next generation. I don't buy all the BS that people say about millennials. They're lazy, they're privileged, they're no good, they're not going to make it. I disagree completely. I think that the next generation is just as good as my generation. And if anything, they just need someone to open their eyes and say, hey, you don't have to just work at Starbucks. You can do great things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there are some great young people today. They're very ambitious, and I think there are a lot of young people doing amazing things. So I agree with you. So
Amen.
yeah. So what advice would you give to someone who wants to pursue a career like yours?
Oh, absolutely. I think my book is a how-to guide.
Hmm.
I think that because I'm so honest about my mistakes and shortcomings, I think that you have a very good illustration of a path that anyone can follow. Because if I can do it, they can do it. And the way I did it is really described, step by step. I literally, when they hired me to work for this camera company that built helicopter cameras, they took me in off the street and I didn't know how to do anything. So I said, that's all right, because I see the shop is messy. So I can just pick up this broom and start sweeping the floor. And, as usual, I took it on with the force of a hurricane. So I didn't have a college degree. I didn't have technical skills. I didn't know anything about the equipment that they used or manufactured. But I knew that if I worked really hard, I could clean that entire shop. And so I stayed up all night and swept and swept and swept and cleaned and straightened. And the next day, when the bosses walked into the shop, you could recognize the place. It didn't even look like the same place. And my boss took one look at the shop and how nice it was, and he pointed to me and he said, "That's it." He said, "You're going with me on my next shoot." And the next week, I was sitting in the back seat of his helicopter as we were flying over a movie, and while he operated the camera. And so I think that when kids today read that story, they're going to learn that, well, you don't have to have a college degree. You don't have to be perfectly prepared for an opportunity or for a new job that you want to have. If you're willing to work hard and not complain, people will want to promote you. They'll want to take you with them on the next shoot. And so that was the key to my success is not having that perfect education or all the right skills or knowing exactly how to do a job. The thing that I brought with me was the willingness to work hard and not complain.
Nice. I love that. So, do you feel like you are living a purpose-driven life?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've had to make some hard choices in my life. My life is definitely messy. It's not perfect. I struggle a lot because I don't generally have a plan. I just kind of follow my heart, from one situation to the next. And so it's inconvenient sometimes and a little messy and probably, unthinkable to some of my friends, who are a little more organized than I am. But I really believe that by following my heart, I've always made the right choice. And whether it's more or less money, whether it's more danger or less danger, I think if I'm following my heart and I'm doing something meaningful, that I'm just happy. I'm just blessed.
Yeah, I agree. And also your intuition, you got to follow that too. Don't forget about that. We got to listen to that little voice in the pit of our stomach that says, maybe that's not a good idea. But all right, so this is the Oh Hell No podcast. So you have to share an Oh Hell No moment, and I'm sure you've had plenty. So please enlighten us today with your Oh Hell No moment.
My Oh Hell No moment was 5 years ago. I was, sitting in my little house in the woods, bothering no one, minding my own business. And one of my neighbors said, "Hey, Dave, there's something weird going on in our little town." And I said, "What, in this town?" He goes, "Yeah, there's something weird. There's these weird characters that look kind of scary, and they're hanging around the school bus stop." And so I got out of my porch and I walked around the corner to the school bus stop, and sure enough, in this tiny little quiet town, I looked around and I saw a bunch of gangbangers, and they looked like a most wanted list of dangerous, tattooed, carrying chains and wearing motorcycle boots, death metal T-shirts and tattoos all up and down their arms and necks. And they're walking around the school bus stop, where the school bus is coming in to drop off elementary school kids. And I looked at that scene, and I have to admit that in my little pea brain head, I looked at that and I said, "Oh, hell no." And I stuck to that. I basically, I drew the battle lines that day, and I said, "You guys don't do this here." And now today, that's what led me to be on your show and to talk to your audience and tell my story, because I'm still saying that. And I want to gather a crowd of people to join with me to say, "Oh, hell no." at this school bus stop, and then hopefully the kids will be safe again.
Nice. I love that, Dave. You are awesome. So tell everyone, tell everyone how they can, where they can follow you, where they can get your book, and your websites, your Instagram handles, all that good stuff.
Thank you very much. If you go to Amazon.com, you can just look up my name, David Allen Arnold, Alan. If you search for the title of book 1, Help from Above, it'll be right on top of the list, and you can start to read some of these stories. If you want to also see the pictures and hear the sounds of what the stories are, flying over the deadliest catch or survivor, you can go to Instagram, look up Airborne Camera, or you can also just search for my name, David Allen Arnold, on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Just search for my name. If you look for the name of the first book, Help from Above, you'll find that as well. And the next book that we just talked about comes out on Amazon in September. So you and I should probably talk again when that goes public.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So thanks again for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed this interview, and I am sure that my listeners will too.
Well, Nicole, you know I'm a big fan. I love listening to your show, and I just love what you're doing and the kind of stories that you're telling. And I absolutely love this podcast, and it's a thrill for me to be on it.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, David.